Hello, everyone. Today, I want to encourage you to remember who you are and to maintain your identity. To do that, I want to first reference a couple scriptures in the book of Daniel, chapter 1, and I'm going to read from verses 1 to 5 and then from 6 to 8. So, beginning from verse 1, during the third year of King Jehoiakim's reign in Judah, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came to Jerusalem and he besieged it. The Lord gave him victory over King Jehoiakim of Judah and permitted him to take some of the sacred objects from the temple of God. So Nebuchadnezzar took them back to the land of Babylonia and he placed them in the treasure house of his God. Then the king ordered Ashpenaz, his chief of staff, to bring to the palace some of the young men of Judah's royal family and other noble families who had been brought to Babylon as captives. Select only strong, healthy, and good-looking young men, he said. Make sure they are well versed in every branch of learning, that they are gifted with knowledge and good judgment, and are suited to serve in the royal palace. Train these young men in the language and literature of Babylon. The king assigned them a daily ration of food and wine from his own kitchens. They were to be trained for 3 years and then they would enter the royal service. Now let me start by asking, who are the Chaldeans? The Chaldeans were a group of people who lived in ancient times, and they lived in what at that time was southern Babylonia, which we now today call southern Iraq. The Chaldeans were an influential, intelligent, and very educated people. They were especially skilled in astrology, astronomy, and they were known as wise men who advised the king. In Genesis chapter 11 and verse 28, it tells us that even Abraham's father himself was from Ur of the Chaldeans. So Abraham's background was from Chaldeans. And in verse 31 of the same Genesis chapter 11, we see that God called Abraham out of Chaldea so that Abraham would follow God to the land that God had promised him and his descendants. You know, sometimes God will lead you out and he will separate you from your comfortable surroundings and bring you to a place where he causes you to unlearn the customs you have grown accustomed to, so that he can train you to where he wants to take you, so that he can bless you. Now, in this account, Nebuchadnezzar was now the king of Babylon. He besieged Israel and he took the children of Israel captive into Babylon. We read that he raided the house of God where they worshipped, and he took all the worship articles to the temple of his God. Now, God allowed this. And he allowed it because at that time, many of the people of God had turned away from following him. I can imagine that the people who were faithful to him during that time and who loved him, they must have felt very disappointed and probably very discouraged. Probably wondering, where is God in all of this? They now had to live and learn how to exist in a culture that was totally alien to the one that they knew. You see, the Babylonians did not worship Jehovah. They had their own ideas about worship and they had their own gods. Now, this is very familiar or similar to the societies we live in today. Sometimes we may feel like aliens in a strange land because the world around us has a completely different culture to that of the kingdom to which we belong. They have their own teachings and their own ideologies. Now, in verse 6, the scripture tells us that Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah were 4 of the young men who were chosen. Now, they were all from the tribe of Judah. The chief of staff renamed them with these Babylonian names. Daniel was called Belteshazzar. Hananiah was called Shadrach. Mishael was called Meshach. And Azariah was called Abednego. But verse 8 tells us, but Daniel was determined not to defile himself by eating the food and wine given to him by the king. He asked the chief of staff for permission not to eat these unacceptable foods. Now, these 4 young men were brought up on the ways of God, and they were now brought before King Nebuchadnezzar. I can hear some of us, but what a grand experience. I can hear some of us say, that must be the favor of God. You are brought into the king's palace. Excellent. God bless you, brethren. 4 of God's children are now chosen to serve in the king's palace. What we must not ignore, however, is the king's agenda. First, he changed their names. Daniel's name was changed to that of one of the gods that the king worshipped. All the boys were given new names, pagan names, and they were supposed to be taught in the ways of the Chaldeans. The question is, how does a young man or a young woman exist in a society where the influencers are trying to change your identity and cause you to submit to their culture? At university, at school, your fellow students who hold to beliefs that are different to yours, how do you traverse that? Can you do it? How do you pull away from the rest of the crowd and chart your own course? Can you sustain? You are, as it were, in a strange land. But I came today to tell you that bright and intelligent as you are, so was Daniel and his 3 friends. Is it always easy to go against the grain? No, absolutely not. But these young men stood up for what they believed, and God rewarded them. I want to encourage you, particularly young men and young women. Your God is your defense. If you make him your priority, he will make you his priority. Don't give in to the pressures. Ask God for his strength. He will not only strengthen you, he will fight for you and reward you. God bless you. I love you.